we'll get rolling there. First, thank you all so much for joining us. My name is Deepak Jayaraman. I run global business development for Antler and sit on the global leadership team. And super excited today to be with you. Both Peter and I are in different locations. We both happen to be in London, however. But with the wonders of technology, we can do this through Zoom. But first, let me introduce Peter Lorant from our partner Zendesk. Peter serves as the EMEA Chief Operating Officer for Zendesk, and sort of and importantly, the Global Senior Vice President of their Partners and Channels division. I think that he comes with a wealth of background in sort of thinking through how early stage companies need to think about customer service and supporting customers, and really thinking about customers not as a cost center, or supporting customers not as a cost center, but really as a revenue opportunity, and really building revenue in to the business. We've been working with Zendesk now for a few months. Super delighted to have them as a premier partner for Antler, and hoping that all of you will really benefit from this opportunity and working with them in the future. So Peter, welcome to the Antler universe.
Excellent. Thank you so much for having me here. It's great to be here, and I look forward to a conversation with you, and hopefully we can make it really interactive and get everybody to throw in some Q&A to keep things going.
Absolutely. Great. Well, let's kick it off. I think some of the things that are on our minds that I think that you definitely would have some clear thoughts and some guidance on. So our Antler stage companies, we're very early when we write our first checks into Antler, and many of the portfolio companies we have are very early in their growth cycle. Can you tell me why should startups in our community care about customer experience and customer service when so many of them are so early in their build stage and so early on the growth curve?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question, and I can't imagine a life without thinking about how you engage with customers and prospects, right? So it's, as a result, it's never too early to invest in being able to listen to your customers, to communicate with your customers, for your customers or prospects to come and communicate with you, and getting that ability to listen and get the feedback into your product direction is as important as once you've got monetization and you've got full paying customers, and how you keep those customers for life. So how customers can communicate, or when I say customers, I also mean the prospects, of course, how they come to your website, how do they find information, how do they chat with you, how approachable are you? Because typically at this stage, you're probably not really very well known in the market. So those first interactions are really important. Can they find information on your website? When they chat with you, can they chat with you over the phone, over the web, over a mobile phone? Are you flexible, open, modern? And then are you quick and responsive? And so it's not just about the whole something's broken, I need to call somebody. That sort of old version of customer support. Now think of it in terms of advocacy. Think of it in terms of having a communication, ongoing dialogue with people who want to know more about you.
That's great. Just as a quick follow-up to that, without naming names, and if nothing comes to mind, that's fair, we can move on, but without naming particular company names in your client universe or with the startups that you work with, can you give a couple of examples of, for example, a startup that got it right early, that paid attention to this and did really well by that strategy, and then conversely, a startup potentially that came to this game late and may have suffered the consequences of coming to this game too late in their journey?
Yeah, so first of all, it might be hard to just single out specific names of customers.
Yeah.
But what's important to say is, we've been in this game for an awfully long time. And Zendesk is really, we've been a company now for 15 years, and obviously we're founded as a startup, but startups have been core to everything that we've been doing. And right now, 15 years later, 59 of our top 100 companies started as startups. So it says a lot about the startups that are super successful right now invested in CX as a core part of their DNA. And again, when we've done some research, something like a third of the top performing startups measured by employee growth and time between funding rounds, all invested in CX in the first year of founding. So rather than giving specifics, I think these are really compelling stats that says the most successful startups invest within the first year, and they're also over the course of the journey, whether it's the Pelotons or the Just Eats of this world, they are using Zendesk, and they've all deployed early on in their life cycle. I can talk a little bit more if you want about what some of the best practices are, or also potentially what some of the worst practices or some common mistakes.
No, I think that's great, and it sort of feeds into my next question, which is, what does great customer experience look like to you? Like, what are some good examples of what this should look like? And conversely, what are some of the pitfalls that other startups that you've seen have fallen into when they've gone about this?
Yeah, so I think great CX, basically in a nutshell, is it's about listening to your customers and being able to be agile and then taking action based on what your customers are telling you. It's about understanding the journey that your customers go on when they interact with you. That interaction could just be going on your website to find out information, or it could be right through to the purchasing and ongoing life cycle. So great CX is listening. It's about understanding the journey from the customer point of view. It's about tracking and measuring everything across to always understand where there might be gaps, where there might be inefficiencies, and where there's opportunities to improve. And it's about closing the loop with product development, with closing loop with sales, it's closing loop with marketing, by listening to all of the touch points that you have. It's also about being really efficient. I think when you're bootstrapped, when you're early stage, you won't have all the money to hire full teams. So how do you automate? How do you use technology for the simple information that most customers want for 80% of the queries they've got, and they're used to this, right? I think especially over the pandemic, a lot of customers are used to self-service. They don't actually want to speak to somebody. They want to do their own research and investigations. And so being able to get that information quickly without speaking with a human. So the adoption of bots and AI comes pretty well out of the box for many solutions out there. And so that automation, adoption of AI, means that when you do speak with a customer, great CX means you can engage more deeply, empathetically, add a lot more value, and generate that loyalty. And then last thing to call out is great CX means you let the customer communicate to you in the channels in which they want to communicate with you. So you're not kettling them into only filling out a web form or only sending us an email, but give them the choice, because they might want to engage with you over chat. They might want to engage with you over phone. They might want to engage with you over email. And when they do that, they don't want to then start from the beginning again and say, look, I've already told you this when I emailed you. I already told you this when I called you. And so having that conversation that never stops, but always picks up from where you started, we call that conversational CRM. And that's something that great CX has, that more natural conversation. And so these are just a couple of the things that great CX looks like, and is all within the realm of any company. A lot of these are what we would call sort of still that the early stage companies can invest in, because you're doing this intelligently. You're not hiring a team of people 7 by 24. A lot of this comes out of the box. So a lot of customers can, a lot of startups can do this very quickly.
Right. And then any sort of horror stories out there of sort of getting it wrong that our startups can sort of, avoid quickly so that they don't make those sort of those mistakes?
Yeah, I think the first horror stories, and it's not so much a horror stories, but we see this time and time again, is that companies of all shapes and sizes will think that good enough is good enough. And it's clearly not the case. In all of our research, we found that the pandemic pass is well and truly behind us. About 2/3 of customers will leave you after one bad experience. And again, when you're really early stage, you can't afford to have those precious few opportunities that are coming in to be a negative one, because you really don't get a second chance. And what we found is before the pandemic, it was 50% will leave you after one bad experience, now 2/3. So the expectations are really high. So just thinking, it's okay, we're still in early stage, good enough is fine for where we are now. Absolutely not. You have to be really attuned to your customers, very reactive immediately, because those early customer references, as you'll know, are so important, and you can't afford to let any prospect down. You can't afford to have any bad word of mouth out there. And so having great customer experience from day one is so important. So first of all, the enemy is good enough will do. So having access, using spreadsheets or email, none of this will get the teams working collaboratively. It will not deliver a good result for your customers. As I said earlier, customers, when they come in, will have to repeat themselves. They won't like that. And so if you treat CX as an afterthought, that is probably sort of the kiss of death, because a lot of startups are coming in as disruptors. You have to deliver that better experience straight off the ground. And then just the last thing to say is having that 360-degree view of your customer interactions are really important. And so don't create silos, but have a way of looking across it. So as I said, if a customer comes in one system or a second system or a third system, you have that 360-degree view of your customers and not create those silos.
That's
and
really,
again, I'd love to get your thoughts on all of this, Deepak.
no, well, the
if
thought
you
that
see things as well.
Sure. Well, the thought that's coming to my mind, it's really a question, which is, you use the word customer a lot, and recognize that we have portfolio companies that are driven by B2B models, others that are B2B2C models, and others that are direct to consumer models or B2C models. How do you distinguish between good CX versus, for customers that are dealing with enterprise versus customers that or versus startups that are dealing with consumers? What does that look like? You have a view on that?
Yeah, so I mean, Zendesk is in a great position, very kind of unique for a company of our size with 6,000 employees, that we've got over 100,000 brands worldwide in like 160 countries. And so we're used to working from startups to small companies, medium to big global enterprises. We're used to working from B2B, B2B2C, and B2C. So a lot of the experience from a CX perspective is broadly similar. Customers, and I say the word customers, and I also mean prospects, right? When people come in,
Sure.
They want to be able to access information quickly. They want you to deliver personalized service as much as possible. Now, obviously, if you're a B2C and you're dealing with millions of consumers, that becomes harder, but the scale is absolutely possible to deliver that personalized service. You just need to rely on automation, AI, and the tech more. But all customers, they want to be engaged as people, not as numbers. So you'll often hear things, let's talk about tickets, but it's not about tickets, it's about the experience, it's about the personalized service that you're getting. So they want you to know about them. They want quick resolutions. They want knowledgeable workers. So when they ask a question, they want it to be routed to somebody who can answer their questions really quickly. And there are some, fast scale startups who do sort of swarming. they sort of, could go to an engineer, somebody in product, somebody in support, and just how you swarm together to deliver that great customer service. So a lot of it is actually broadly similar. And that's why, Zendesk, we have some industry specialization, but we find that whatever size, whatever industry, whether you're B2B or B2C, it's all about getting the right information, supporting customers, prospects, quickly with the right information, and getting that personalized service. The B2B tends to be a much richer, deeper, because they tend to be fewer of those engagements.
Sure.
But again, the principles behind it, the infrastructure required from a CX perspective is broadly the same.
Yeah, I'll tell you, my own experience personally, just as a one consumer, one micro data point in the world, right? What I find really interesting about this conversation is how much of my personal time is impacted dealing with customer service matters, right? I find that I have an amazing customer service experience where my engagement with the company that I'm trying to, trying to get a product and service from, is very simple, and with as least amount of intrusion on my time as possible. And that goes from, being able to chat with somebody on a chat line very quickly to get an answer, to not having to press 15 buttons to get to the right person on the phone, right? And increasingly in a world where we are so hampered for time, and also, and this goes back to, I don't know, I want to build another quick question about this, is the availability of so many channels available, right? I find it a bit challenging when I have 15 different mechanisms to get in front, to get an answer queried, or to get something resolved. And when there are so many, it's a consistent intrusion upon my day in terms of figuring out the right pathway to get to the right answer. So my question to you, especially in the B2C space, are you finding any particular channels that customers are favoring more other than others? I mean, I can't stand dealing with emails, candidly, and I shy away from having to do that. Are there ones that you're seeing that are better used?
Yeah, so absolutely. What we find is the general messaging channel. So if you're in Europe, it tends to be WhatsApp. It could be chat in America, it could be the US, it could be WeChat if you're dealing in the Far East. And so those messaging platforms are by far the most frequently used if you're in the B2C mode. But then again, from an agent perspective, it doesn't matter. And that's the beauty of what Zendesk offers, is the agent will see it come in one pane of glass, right? You could be coming in over a phone, you could be coming in over email, you could be coming in over WeChat, you could be coming in over an email form. The agent experience is still the same. It all comes into one place. So from an agent perspective, they don't really care. They will interact with you as a consumer in the way that you want to be communicated with. And so I think that's really important. And consumers want that flexibility. One other, observation is a bit to the point of B2B versus B2C is you will judge companies based on the best experience out there. It could be with Amazon, it could be, with Apple, it could be, with Peloton, pick your favorite brand, whether you're a B2B, whether you're an auto manufacturer, whether you're, a hairdresser, or whether you're a software company, you're going to be benchmarked against best of all breeds.
Interesting.
And that's how you're going to be benchmarked. And so that's why I'm saying it's less about the industry, it's less about B2B, because I think about, geez, how does Amazon provide such good experience at that scale? How does Apple, when I tried to cancel my antivirus subscription, I had the choice of doing it 7x24, any kind of, mechanism. And it's like, they've mastered that is how I benchmark everybody. Conversely, you think automatically of some really horror stories with travel and transport, typically airlines, and then that just, that negative word of mouth gets out there.
Well, it leads me to my next question. I mean, that's almost inherently unfair to a startup, right? How can a early stage startup just getting going be benchmarked against Amazon? I mean, I guess psychologically it makes sense, but in practical terms, that seems awfully unfair to be cast upon a startup in that view. Let me just pivot to a quick question, which is,
Well, can I answer? Can I just say that?
Okay,
Because I
sure.
think that I don't want people to be anchored into thinking this is only big companies with big, deep pockets. As I alluded to earlier, and I'm trying desperately, and we talked about this, this is not a sales pitch, everybody. But what I am saying is this comes largely out of the box. Zendesk was created for startups at the beginning, and it was all about making it really easy. You get all of this. This is not something that is enterprise software that takes 6 months to install and you need a huge amount of money, right? So all of this omni-channel comes right out of the box. So this is not a sales pitch, but it's about saying you don't have to have super deep pockets for all of this, and you have to be a big Amazon. And I come back to another message that I said earlier, and that is all of the startups here are disruptors. You have an opportunity because very few brands out there have that kind of omni-channel first, digital first customer obsession. And this is available to you. Your role as disruptors is to go out there and disrupt people who do not have that CX mindset that potentially Amazon or an Apple or a Peloton will have. There's huge opportunity for every member of your portfolio to do this right now.
Right. Listen, very quickly, we have a one of our audience members who has a quick question, and she has to leave. So I'm going to ask this question very quickly. Hopefully she's able to hang in there and listen to this before she goes. And this is a quick cue to everyone who's in the audience. Please send in your questions. We're going to reserve about 15 minutes at the end for them. But one of our portfolio companies from Amsterdam has asked this question. It pivots a little bit of what I said before, which is they have their service is sort of a one-stop shop platform that is catering to both B2C and B2Bs, right? And their view is that VCs tend to favor B2B businesses over B2C businesses, and I think there are reasons why that is. I mean, I think it's hard to build B2C brands. There's a lot of money that you have to pour in to do that, but from a customer retention revenue perspective, if you were to counsel a startup that's actually making that momentary choice of whether to pivot to B2B versus B2C from a customer experience point of view, would you have any advice on how they should think through that problem?
I think this is maybe might be interesting more from a VC perspective than from a vendor's perspective. B2B tends to be sort of a mile deep and an inch wide. B2Cs, when you're at this stage, tend to be more a mile wide and an inch deep. And again, the technology can suit either. I think when you're B2C, it also, we were talking about this the other day about, do you go global at the start, or do you stay local? And you can't do everything. And I think it's about finding what you're fantastic at and delivering the best customer experience for what you're excellent at. And that it could be in a B2B where you can really go deep with specific customer requirements in a specific industry, or it could be specific, country-based versus going global. So I would say from a startup, it's about what are you excellent at and what is your ability to deliver the best customer experience from start to finish. But again, love to get your thoughts on, if you have any advice on somebody who's making that kind of critical decision.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think the challenge, in my personal view, in my investing experience, is this, right? I firmly believe that the best founders of the world build businesses that they intuitively care about and that they're passionate about. And we write that first check into them, and pretty soon and quickly they have to raise their second check. I mean, it is just the life cycle of a business. But it's a bit tragic when you're forced to make a pivot into something because of because of access to capital and because sort of someone is putting constraints on you in that regard. And I think that if you look at the best businesses that win over time, it's because the founders are truly passionate about what they do. And I think that's where the real winner. This is one person's opinion. It's not an Antler view. I want to be careful about that. But I think that, holding to your guns and having conviction of what you're doing, and willing to grind it out, because this is, being an entrepreneur isn't easy, and, all the more power to you, but being able to grind it out and hold your conviction, I personally think that's the better mantra. I recognize that in some practicalities that doesn't work, mouths have to be fed, but, I'd hate to have sort of VCs being dictating to startups where they need to go just on the basis of sort of winning capital. That's a personal view.
Yeah, and I think, like, I've been in companies like Zendesk and Google before that, where it was very much, we started selling into the small and medium businesses, then we went upscale, and then we went into the enterprise. I've also been in businesses that were very much, Fortune 100 going down into the mid-market. And when you think about the, your cash burn, and you think about the sales cycles, enterprise sales cycles, if you're going in to the larger end of the market, in my previous life, it would be at least 4 to 6 quarters.
At least.
Sales cycle.
And not to mention the procurement processes that you've got to go through to get there, which is mind-boggling, right?
So on the more, if you are going B2B, then I think if you're going into the more small, medium end of the business, then the sales cycles could be much quicker. But again, you need that referenceability typically, and your product needs to be really standing out, and the whole customer experience that they get has to disrupt the customers from going with more traditional established vendors out there. On the B2C side, as you said, it comes to more of a brand, but it can be quicker to get revenue in because the cost of change is typically much less than when you're going into a company.
Interesting.
When you have to do procurement, legal, and all those.
For sure. Let me ask you this question about building a global business for a second, right? If you are building and maybe think about a company that's raised a seed or going into Series A and really starting to expand and go into new territories and markets. When you build a global business and you're offering your product and services to customers of different cultures and different buying patterns and different expectations, how do you triangulate to giving them the best service when they come from different worldviews and different points of view? Do you have a view on how our startups should be thinking about that and spending money to optimize across all zones versus standardizing the customer service experience?
Yeah, and I mean, Zendesk, in our own experience, were started by 3 people in Copenhagen 15 years ago. All of a sudden, we saw customers coming in from Europe, across Latin America, Asia Pacific, and US. And so this is our own experience, that it was started with 3 people, and all of a sudden customers started coming in, everywhere. And I see Yaroslav is asking the same kind of question around how do you get, customer acquisition around the world, and what works and what doesn't. And I think, for startups being, global from the start, I think is really important. And I think we're also in a different world now than we were, back when Zendesk was starting. And what we find with many of the startups is you're already hiring people from around the world. The days of having an office and having everybody come into the office, if it's in Berlin, if it's in New York or in San Francisco, now you're already hiring typically talent from around the world. So not only is your customer base becoming global from the start, but your employee base is becoming more global from the start. And I think that's great, because that brings in a diversity of thought, and also will make your products more diverse as well, and better for those regional markets. So obviously, just understanding where your TAM is. So you're going in with an understanding of, well, what is your addressable market? Again, what are you trying to excel at? Where's the best fit? How big is that market? And then understanding what are the customer requirements. Is a customer in Santiago the same as a customer in Madrid, the same as a customer in Sydney? And just understanding your customer product market fit is really important. Because I've seen, and I'm sure you've seen this, where startups get distracted by a big customer, and it takes you off your roadmap, and it becomes a massive distraction, or potentially the creation of your company.
Catalyst. Yeah.
That one customer. And so just being really clear about as much as you can with the game plan. And of course, you know, every plan is fine until you get punched in the nose. I think I butchered that metaphor, but anyway, I think you know what I mean. So, you know, going in with a game plan, where is your product fit? And if you really are trying to sell to a global market, as Zendesk was, just again, understanding how much of what you're building is global, and building an infrastructure from scratch that will enable you to scale effectively, efficiently, globally, so that you're not spinning up data centers, that you're not hiring a team of Thai-speaking support, and then Spanish-speaking, and you're trying to build out a follow the sun from day one. That's hugely costly. Again, there's ways that technology can overcome that. I think understanding that what is that minimum viable product, what's that minimum viable customer service that still gives you that customer excellence experience.
Interesting. You mentioned before, and you know, and I'm going to make an assumption that many of our startups think about it this way, that customer support can often be viewed as a cost center because they're having to effectively, you know, build that into their P&Ls and pay for it. But I, you know, in chatting with you earlier, I think it's your view to not look at it that way. Can you give us some sense of why it should be looked at more as a revenue opportunity? And correspondingly, are there any metrics out there that you're using, or that you're seeing some innovative startups using to sort of track and justify even internally the spend on customer service?
Yeah, so starting with the core of the question, you know, again, old school, it was a break fix mentality where customer support was there once you had a problem. And then it became sort of a tax on both the customer and then a tax on the company to pay for that team. That still is a part of what they do, obviously, because customer issues do arise. And then you need to track, you know, first response time and all of that fun stuff. But where I think when you're on the early stage and on the startup, it's more about how the teams, all teams come together, and how, and I've touched on this earlier, how when you've got a customer success team, they talk with your product organization and they give the feedback because they're speaking with customers and prospects more frequently than the product team is. And so they're part of that product innovation team. There's no KPI around that, but there is, it's just when you're a small, you know, bootstrap team, it's everybody's, you know, in the army, everybody gets to be part of the product strategy. And I think that the customer support team has a really valuable voice to add to that. And then once you are generating revenue, we do find that some of the top companies out there have cross-sell metrics or upsell metrics that the support team can be measured on. Customer retention, again, is super important for the customer success team to be compensated on. So everybody is focused on delivering the best service, the best ongoing customer experience. And again, when you're a small company, there are no passengers. Everybody has to either fit into the product strategy or fit into the sales strategy.
Yeah, it's interesting because, I mean, I think we'd all agree that retaining a customer is in some cases a lot easier if you do it right than acquiring a new one. And, you know, if you lose a customer having worked so hard to get it, you're doubly penalized because you have to replace that customer and you've spent a lot of time getting that customer in the first place. So you're behind the 8 ball twice. That's just not a good look if you want to think about it from that perspective.
And again, those early referenceable customers, that is your marketing budget right there, right? I mean, once you have referenceable customers that will help you sell into other prospects, that is worth, its weight in gold. And so getting those evangelists, those early stage customers to be helping you in marketing events, sales references. And so especially for disruptors, especially for early stage companies, it's even trebly expensive, because that is your marketing material right there.
Interesting. Just a quick shout out again to our audience. The question box is open, so please send them in. We have some some questions that were sent in prior to the event, which we'll go through in a few minutes, but would love to hear from you all out there. Question here. I'm curious to know, you see this day in and day out. Who's doing this the best in the world, in your opinion? Who is a great reference point for folks to think of? I mean, obviously, Jeff Bezos put a absolute premium on this when he built Amazon, for sure. I mean, from day one, this was the most important thing to him as he built Amazon. But maybe closer to home in terms of growth stages, as opposed to a company like Amazon, who would you say is doing this really, really well?
Yeah, so I think a lot of the big names that are out there are pretty obvious. But I think when we look at some of the smaller startups closer to home, a lot of them are sort of on the B2C side, because they understand, that they've got their finger on the zeitgeist of what customers want. And then you see, for example, Line Bike. They're a really strong customer out there of Zendesk, and I'm a personal user of them as well. And their ability to, again, engage with customers who rent a bike in any sort of channel that they want. They're able to do 7x24 multilingual support. And this is a really small company. So they do omni-channel, they do multilingual. They scale their team so they don't have to hire huge numbers of support, because of their utilization of automation, of AI, of self-service. So they tick all of the right boxes. They're super responsive. They let the customer sort of dictate how they want to be engaged with. They're able to provide 7x24 support, multilingual, and they're able to scale with the team. And so I think, like I said, it's not the purview of just huge companies, but that's just, I think, is a great example. On the bigger end of town, another one of our customers, what I really like about them, and they're in the food delivery business, they're a very well-known brand in the UK and Europe as well, is when you've got a food delivery challenge, when you call them up, you're able to triangulate and get the rider, the restaurant, and the customer all on the same chat. So you're not playing like phone tag and like, okay, let me call the rider calls, the restaurant calls the customer back. And then it's like really bad experience for everyone. Everyone hates that. And it's a really nice way of having that messaging-based conversation. And I think if you are in a business that has those multi-touch points, getting that conversation again over messaging is just a fantastic example of just a win-win-win for everybody. And then the last one is, again, in some of the upper end hospitality, Four Seasons, if you're lucky enough to stay at any of their properties, they have such a phenomenal personalized service for you. And again, it's all done, whatever device you want. They know who you are, and that personalized service. So I think if you just take a bit of all of that, the personalization that Four Seasons can deliver, the wonderful conversational CRM that the food delivery service can deliver, and then the scale, the smartness that Line Bikes can deliver, the efficiency with which they're able to scale this up to deliver fantastic 7x24 multilingual. These are just a couple of examples out there that I think just puts the finger on the pulse of what's possible, not the billion-dollar Jeff Bezos out there. I don't know. Do you have any great customer experiences that you've seen or that you've been through recently?
Interestingly enough, in the airline space, I tend to fly a lot.
Yes.
And we hear a lot of horror stories coming out, certainly out of the United States. I tend to have a lot of empathy for these folks who are really struggling, and the industry struggles. But I think Delta Airlines in the US does it actually quite well. I think it starts with really good training. I think that they have really trained their staff very well to really handle a fairly unruly client base. It's not easy. But I think they've also invested in a lot of great experience. Their app is really good. The technology they're putting into that is really good. You get a lot of information. You get upgraded quickly if you're lucky to do that. I mean, a lot of they're using technology to based on data, they're predicting what questions customers will ask, and they're using technology to get them answered before you have to ask the question. So in a broad view, I'm pretty excited about that. And being here in the UK, sadly, I can't quite throw that on BA. I think they could learn a trick or two, but that's just my personal view. I did want to go back to what you said before. You used the word multilingual twice in that last question, in that last answer. How important is being multilingual in customer service? I mean, is this something that our guys need to be really paying attention to? What is your view there?
So again, it's about listening to your customers. And if you can't understand your customers, if you are doing a lot of business in international markets, then yeah, how can you deliver good support if you can't communicate and if they can't communicate to you? So certainly there are, especially when you're in early stages, there are some good auto translation engines out there. They plug directly into Zendesk, so you can send us a chat or an email, and it will come in and translate into whatever language, and it can then pump it back out. I think, yeah, there's a whole bunch of technologies. I think Unbabel is one of the ones we use. So there's a lot of technology-based capabilities to do that. You don't have to do that if you've got permission to play as an English speaking or whatever your native language is. If that is where all of your sales and marketing and everything, like when you engage with them, if everything is going to be English, then again, I think that technology smart way of automating it is sufficient. But yeah, if you're doing a lot of business in China, Japan, Korea, it's really hard to engage in those countries through technology because it's not typically robust enough for some of those languages. And also they expect it. They expect you to speak with them in their language.
Got it. I have a question from the audience. It's actually a really great question from one of our portfolio companies. Rajir, I hope I pronounced that correct. This is your question. He asks, can you elaborate on strategies to turn a support inquiry into an upsell opportunity? What do you know that is effective, and how can technology support this? I think it's a great question. Do you have any views here?
Yeah, and it's something that we haven't talked much about. You started to allude to it on your best class example, and that is for your customer success team or your customer support team, it's all about the people that you hire. It's about how you train them. And it's really hard to train for an attitude. It's really hard to train to listen to people. Like that's either in your DNA or it's not. You either somebody who gets really excited about supporting and keeping customers delighted, or you're just somebody who sees it as like, okay, done, tick, next one, done, tick, next one. And so the first thing is really the culture of the company, your hiring criteria of the support people that you're hiring. It's about how you train them. And that training, we talked in Rajio's question around technology. So technology can help. So we do a lot of to help agents understand the products. There's a lot of macros that if this comes in, this is the recommended way for you to answer. And then it's an easy way of guiding customers through a process. But again, if they're good at listening, if they're empathetic, if you've trained them, and that's why technology, it's all about the training and the culture first, and then technology can then help accelerate and amplify. But the first thing is culture, second thing is training, and then technology can amplify. I think if you start with technology, coming back to a pitfall from earlier, if you start with technology, that tends to lead to A, suboptimal results, and then B, you tend to rip and replace it because you realize it's not actually solving the customers. It didn't scale, it didn't deliver because you didn't spend time to understand the customer journey. Let me open it up to my colleague Jeremy, who's also on the call. He's also got some great experience.
Hey, Jeremy.
Yeah, hey, Deepak, how you doing? Yeah, just to add to that, I think, and I'm going to bring in Zendesk example and link it back to your Delta example there. What you can do certainly is be able to tag within that customer support. So if I've had numerous inputs from you and your journeys, and I can store that information and tag to say, actually, Deepak's paid to upgrade 24 hours before his flight on 5 separate occasions. That insight, which can be held in the CRM, can be tagged, and then that outbound, I can then go out to you and say, hey, Deepak, it's 24 hours before your flight. I've got a great offer for you. That's turning that customer service into a profit center because you're upselling.
I hope that offers for a free upgrade, by the way.
Hey,
at this point, with the amount I fly, I'm due. I promise you.
Absolutely. And there's one other thing on that. And again, this is again turning that to customer service center and a profit center, linking it back to that insight that you're gathering, but also linking it into the self-service. So to truly be a global business, to truly be a global startup without being a global startup, you have to have your 24-hour self-support, right? So when you're off, when you're asleep, you've got questions being answered at all times. What you can nicely and neatly link into that as self-service questions are, well, actually, this is a question that's been asked by a few people, and we know that 10, 15, 20 of those people from a startup level maybe have actually bought this product which solves that need. And linking that straight back into a carousel, which goes into a messenger of products that you can say, hey, you can actually deal with that question that you have or that query by purchasing this item. And that's an add-on, and that's, again, turning that customer service right into a profit center. I thought I'd just jump in and just say that because I thought it was two neat examples which link back into what you were talking about there, Deepak. Yeah,
I appreciate that. That's great.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. And it also, and this might be really interesting to probably some members of your portfolio companies out there, is also the adoption of AI to get a lot of signals from the market, so that you can also be proactive in reaching out to customers, saying, hey, this is what you've done in the past. This is something that a bit like the recommendation engine that Amazon delivers. But it also could be, there's you contacted us to order something. We live in a crazy world right now where there's COVID shocks, supply chain shocks, and inflation shocks. And it's also about being proactive to your customers, saying, what you ordered is now, there's a 2-month delay because shipments coming in from China have been delayed. We recommend now the following, that proactive outreach. And you can do that either through technology or through things like supply chain disruptions. Delivers not just great customer service, but it gives you an opportunity to upsell or to provide alternatives. And we see some really interesting examples of also adoption of AI to provide that special insight into customer behavior.
Very interesting. I want to track a little bit toward a couple of questions that were submitted prior to our event today. We are coming up upon the end, last few minutes of our chat. I've really enjoyed this, by the way, Peter. Thank you for spending some time with us and giving us your insights. Can you given your place in the world, right, in terms of you seeing not only your own business's sort of attention to your customers, but having a bird's eye view as to all your clients and how they're dealing with customers. Can you give us any sense of the economic headwinds ahead and whether there are any markets or segments that you see in the data that are being prioritized by customers or for customers?
Yeah, I think the headwinds are definitely coming out there. I think you can't read a newspaper without, being a little bit depressed these days. And you're right, we are in a good position given, so many customers and so many markets that we support in. So what we're seeing or the recommendations that I have is first of all, great companies are often born out of these kind of disruptions.
Yeah.
We always talk about the Microsofts, the LinkedIns, but closer to home, like Poundland and Sage Technologies. Like, there's so many that started because everybody is going through a disruption right now. So it's a perfect time for companies that are offering a compelling, disruptive offering to be successful now. People are open to doing something different because they have to do something different. Right now, it's a great time to be out there with a disruptive offering. If you're a Me Too, very challenging, but if you're out there with a disruptive, I think it's really challenging. We are also looking at, which industries are still benefiting. So like right now, travel and transport is going through the roof. Gaming continues to be sort of recession-proof. So we're looking at certain industries that have not yet been massively affected by the headwinds, but we're in it for the long haul. So it's also about making sure that you're building a brand, that you're keeping all of your existing customers happy. It's also about keeping your employees happy and focusing on the training that I said. It's about building out your employer brand, not just your vendor brand. And we're also looking as a company that's grown quickly over the 15 years, is you have to develop an or culture, not an and culture.
Right.
And you have to really understand what's critical, what's core, which markets are important. And you can't do everything everywhere. And this is then where my second role comes into it, which is how you can scale through partnerships. Because we're not going to hire teams in Vietnam or Colombia, but we'll hire partners to go out there and do the sales for us, do the marketing for us, support the customers for us, because that's a much more efficient, less capital intensive way of growing. So I think the channel and how you scale through partnerships is also doubly important. And you could look at it in, yeah, but I'm losing margin because I have to pay an entity to go out there and do this for us. But you wouldn't have got, those dollars, euros, pounds, yens, pesos, if you hadn't had that local feet on the street with the local relationships who could go out there and do the selling for you or the supporting for you. So I also think it's a really interesting time to look at your go-to-market strategy and how you scale through partners as well.
Interesting. Okay, I have two more questions for you.
Okay.
So hopefully in 4 minutes we can get through them. Yeah. The first one is just a quick question from our founder base. They said before, listen, we're very proud of the fact that a good portion of our portfolio companies, certainly outpacing the market, are led by female founders and female entrepreneurs. And I'm curious to know in the data set whether you see any particular obstacles at all or strategies that those that are female founders can either deploy or have to overcome when they build their businesses, certainly from a customer support angle. Is there anything you might share there?
Yeah. So I was actually, when we talked about that and when that question came in, I spoke with our global VP of the startup program, Kristen. And she said, yeah, fundraising is definitely a barrier for female starters. Only a small fraction, like literally less than 5% of all VC capital goes to female-backed businesses. And at the same time, something like 93% of professional developers out there, tech developers, are men. And I think so many of those startups have come from, tech developers. And so if 93% of those tech developers are men that then found the companies on the back, then of course that's perpetuates. So I think there's a lot of great coding for women schools out there. The one main thing that when I was speaking with Kristen that she recommended is just building a super strong network of advisors out there who can help make the intros to key people who will help you be successful, and being really intentional in leveraging those mentors and those networks, and not being afraid to call in every favor, to ask all of your contact book to help out. But on the other side, it's about being really collaborative and cross-functional. And I think in general, female founders tend to be better at doing that in general than males. So I don't think there's anything in any other, from at least from what we've seen, but just build that network. That's, I think, the main advice that Kristen was sharing with me.
Can't wait for the day where I don't have to ask that question.
Me too.
So all right, so I'm going to leave you with one last question. It's a very simple one. Is the customer always right?
I spent 8 years at Google, and the famous saying that we had at Google is, if you ask the customer, we would have just had a faster horse. So I think sometimes if you're a disruptor, you need to challenge the customer's thinking, because they will almost always default to the status quo. And if what you're offering is a disruptive service, you need to explain this is classic challenger selling, why their current way of working is not optimal, and that there's a better way. So the simple answer is no, but there's a better way, but you have to explain why it's better for them, because everybody loves change when it's somebody else has to change. When it's you that has to change, a lot of people are resistant, and there's a lot of psychology behind that. But if you get them to understand the why, and that it's better for them, what's in it for me, and you have to really understand, this comes back to what I said earlier, you have to really listen to your customers, not what they're telling you, but what's behind what they're telling you. And that's where I'm saying it's an art, it's a science, it's the culture of the people that you bring in. And that's where I was saying, if you just automate everything, you'll lose a lot of that. And so it's a fantastic opportunity, especially in these sort of grim economic times, for you to go out there and disrupt by showing your customers that there's a better way, and why your product/solution will help them be better and make the world a better place.
Well, that's fantastic. Listen, I think we'll leave it there. I want to thank our audience for chiming in, and certainly thank Peter, Jeremy, the rest of the Zendesk team, Ali and Laura on our team here who put this together, and hopefully it was beneficial for everyone. I certainly enjoyed the conversation, and really thank you for your time today, guys, and appreciate all the support that you're giving our startups and support of the Antler community.
It's an absolute pleasure. We're here to support you. We're here to support your network. There's a lot of benefit of being in the Antler portfolio that Zendesk can add value through our startup program. So please reach out. Jeremy's on the call. Ali and team will make sure that everybody has access to our startup special promotion for the Antler community.
Amazing. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much. I guess we'll leave it there, and we'll be in touch soon. Cheers.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Be safe, everybody. Take
Bye
care.
now.
Bye now. Thank you.